Good pigs. Hello and welcome back to Mossy Bottom. I hope everyone's well and enjoying this beautiful spring weather we've been having. I know these two certainly are. So if you haven't already guessed, this video is going to be all about Kunekune pigs. I'm going to try and cover all the basic questions and concerns which I remember having when I got them for the first time, and also talk about Kunekunes as a breed compared to other breeds. We'll tackle the questions one at a time, but let me just give you the short list before we get started. So firstly, the question everyone has been asking me in the comments of other videos: do I eat my pigs? And if not, what are they for? Next, why did I choose Kunekunes as a breed? How big do they get? Are they aggressive? How long do they live? That sort of thing. Then, how much space do they need and what do I use as an enclosure? What about housing for nights and in the winter? Of course, what do they eat and how much? And then, what do my Kunekunes most love in life? And similarly, what do they most hate? And finally, what are my reflections after having them now for about a year, and would I recommend them to others? So let's jump right in and answer that first question. No, these pigs are not for eating. But that's not to say that they're pets either. Every animal on my little small holding contributes something or other towards my ability to be self-sufficient. Even Moss, believe it or not, who sleeps outside at night. And I know some of you don't agree with that, in spite of him having a handmade insulated kennel which is actually warmer than my caravan. But he is very active in keeping predators like foxes, stray dogs, mink, away from my various other animals. I've got chickens and ducks and rabbits, so he plays a really essential role in keeping them safe. Of course, I love Moss very much, but you know, he's here for a reason, and the same is true of these pigs. Their role is to turn the soil, digging out any perennial roots, of which there are many here, believe me, and preparing it for next season's crop. And at the same time, they're also depositing dung back into that soil, which will be broken down by bacteria, earthworms, and other creatures, adding back to the fertility which has been taken out by the crops I've grown the previous year. And pigs have been assisting people as kind of organic ploughs since they were first domesticated. And on a small holding like mine, they're particularly valuable because I have about an acre of land to process every year for vegetable growing, with no tractor, just a digging fork and a relatively strong back, at least for the moment. And that only goes so far. So these pigs really are an important addition to Mossy Bottom. And I'll talk about whether they've done a good job of turning the soil in a moment. But first, on the subject of eating pigs, I do want to add that if you are someone who has chosen to eat pork and you're in a position to keep a couple of pigs every year, then for the sake of animal welfare, it is absolutely better to produce your own meat than it is to buy it from a supermarket. Pigs are highly intelligent, highly social animals that should spend most of their lives outside in small family groups, bathing in the sun, or lack of here in Ireland, wallowing about in mud holes and rooting about for their dinner. And if you can make a choice between buying meat from animals kept on concrete floors, in metal cages by the thousand, which ultimately supports that kind of industry, or getting that same meat, probably a lot nicer tasting, from animals which have had a far better, more natural life, then I think that choice is a no-brainer. So question 2. What are Kunekunes like as a breed, and why did I in particular choose them? And my answer to this question very much relates to how effective they are at their job, so bear with me on that. First, I want to give you a quick overview of the breed. Kunekunes are actually the smallest recognised pig breed in the world. You may have heard of micro pigs and miniature pigs, but they aren't actually breeds. It's all a bit of a scam, the whole micro pig thing. In terms of the smallest legitimate breed, it's these Kunekunes. And they originate from New Zealand, which has a temperate climate not that dissimilar to Ireland's, hence the thick fur to keep them warm in the winters. As adults, they weigh up to about 100 kilos, the boars, which I'm told by Google is about 220 pounds. Now, compared to your classic commercial pink pig, like the landrace, it's a big difference. Those would be about 3 times the size and weight of kunekunes. So these really are pretty small. Mine are still less than a year old, and the biggest, the ginger one, is probably about 40 to 50 kilos. Not the easiest things to weigh, because they don't like to stand still for very long or cooperate, but I reckon they're about that sort of weight. Both of these two are sows or females, so they won't grow as large as the males, the boars do, probably reaching a maximum of about 60 kilos, maybe 65. They can live for 8 to 10 years, I'm told, so if, like me, you don't intend to eat them, then choosing to get pigs is definitely a pretty long-term commitment. In terms of temperament, kunekunes are renowned for being very, very friendly and non-aggressive. Neither of mine have ever bitten me or anyone else or anything else. Although I should say they're certainly quite inquisitive with their snouts and mouths. They like to use them to explore new things, like pockets and wellies and buckets and anything pretty much that you bring into this space. So some people do find them quite intimidating for that reason, even though really it's just the piggy equivalent of how us humans use our hands in social situations. And that brings me nicely back to the question of whether they've done a good job here of turning the soil and digging out all those perennial roots. One thing you'll consistently read when researching kunekune pigs is that they're supposedly grazers like sheep, not rooters like just about every other breed of pig on the planet. And that fact, or that supposed fact, put me off getting them for a very long time, because I specifically wanted pigs that would root, and I could rotate around to different plots to dig up the leftover roots and weeds. However, don't believe everything you read, because from day one of having them here, both of my kunekunes have worked tirelessly, rooting up the soil with their snouts. I really could not have hoped for more in that regard. They've done a fantastic job, and you can see behind them in the background just how much they dig up the soil. So this area behind me, which I've just recently planted potato ridges in, was completely overgrown with nettle, with bramble, buttercup, hogweed, giant hogweed, which is an invasive species here in Ireland, and of course lots of grass as well. Until I moved the pigs in back here in January, and they completely cleared it. And you can see their new area over here, which they've occupied for about a month, maybe a month and a half, is already well on its way to being cleared of weeds, especially if you compare it to the area behind, the grass field, which is what it originally looked like here. So don't be put off getting kunekunes if you have a small holding and want some organic ploughs to work your soil. If you let them out on a large pasture of an acre or more, then they probably will prioritise grazing over digging, because it's quicker, it's a quicker source of food, and pigs will always take the easiest food source first. So the key, if you do want them to work your soil like me, is to limit them to a slightly smaller area. This area here is about 50 square meters. And then of course, you've got to move them quite frequently once they've ploughed up that soil. So that takes us nicely to the next question, which is how much space they need and what to use as an enclosure. Well, as to how much space they need, as I kind of already mentioned, it really depends on whether you want them to turn the soil or to graze, like a sheep or a goat would. And if you intend to do the latter, then stock-proof fencing, similar to that used for sheep and goats, is probably your best bet. Pigs are definitely escape artists. It's another one of those things that you read about. And although kunekunes are said to be less inclined to escape than other breeds of pig, I can definitely say from experience that if there's a weakness in your fence which might be exploited, then sooner or later your pigs will find a way to exploit it, so be prepared for that. But the wonderful thing, with my pigs at least, is that whenever they escape, Fatso, which is the ginger one, so named because she steals all the food and is terribly greedy, will just make a beeline for the nearest patch of weeds or grass and start munching away, which is usually right outside the enclosure. And Titch, which is the smaller black and white one, usually finds her way to wherever I am on the land and comes and says hello, basically. So they're not the hardest animals to find when they do escape, and they don't tend to wander very far. So back to fencing. If, like me, you want to rotate your pigs for the purpose of turning the soil, improving the structure, working in fertility, that sort of thing, then your best bet is to use electric fencing like this. You will need plastic posts. As you can see, I have them about every 1.5 meters. Fencing wire, which is this stuff, it's not currently on. An energizer, which is this device. And a power source, which in my case is a 12-volt leisure battery. You can get energizers which work with mains electricity. You can also get them which work with 9-volt disposable batteries. That tends to be what most of the farmers around here use. But in my opinion, it's neither economical, because you have to throw them out every time they run out of power, nor is it good for the environment because of waste. I would absolutely recommend the 12-volt option. It seems to work brilliantly well, and you can just hook a car or leisure battery up to it and then charge it either off a solar panel, or you can use a battery charger off your main supply. So that really is the great thing about electric fencing. It's very easy to set up. A bit intimidating to begin with because there are a few things you have to buy, and of course it costs a couple of $100 maybe for the battery and the energizer and the wire and things, but once you've done it once, it's very easy after that. The most time-consuming part, for me at least, is generally untangling the wire. It's devilish stuff. But another advantage is that it can be used on uneven ground, unlike, say, poultry netting for anyone who keeps chickens or ducks. In terms of getting shocked, the first thing I did when setting up this fence was to test it on myself, as you do, of course. And although unpleasant, the electric shock is not painful. And the great thing about pigs, of course, being so intelligent, is that they very, very quickly learn not to touch the fence. In the case of Fatso and Titch here, it took about a day, maybe a day and a half, or a couple of shocks each before they were avoiding the fence entirely. But that said, they will test the boundaries of the fence every now and again, like any pig. And if you take your battery in to charge overnight, as I sometimes do, then don't be surprised if your pigs figure out exactly what's going on and start plotting the great escape every time they see you go near that battery. So the next question is, what about housing for cold nights and over the winter? Well, this, as you can see behind me, being utilized nicely by Fatso, is my pig house. And like all the animal enclosures here, I made it myself to a kind of simple, robust design. It's sort of custom made, I suppose, for Kunekunes, being that it's quite small. If you were keeping any other breed of pig, you'd definitely need something considerably bigger. But for these two, I think it's perfect. The important thing is to provide protection from the rain, wind, and of course a bit of ventilation to keep out the damp. Although it has to be said with pigs, they never urinate or defecate in their sleeping area. They're actually very clean animals. They have a designated toilet area outside, and because I suppose they generate quite a lot of body heat, moisture buildup doesn't really tend to be a problem. What they do need a lot of is straw, and every night they spend about 5 minutes assiduously working away, turning that straw with their trotters and mouth into the perfect pig-shaped nest. Without fail, if I come here in the night to check on them, all I see is a pair of pig snouts sticking out from a big mass of straw. It really is impressive just how skilled they are at tucking themselves in at night. And of course, they always sleep cuddled up next to each other for warmth. I guess that's their intelligence again. which is just one of the reasons that it's always best to get at least 2 pigs together. They're also very, very social, very communicative animals, which, as I've said, live in family groups in the wild. And so replicating that as closely as possible in a domestic setting is the best way to keep them happy. So what do they eat and how much? Well, I've read that kunekunes, unlike any other variety of pig, can survive on grass alone with hay through the winter months if they're kept on a large enough pasture. And the reason for that is that they have a much lower protein requirement than other types of pig. But in practice, I don't really think that happens much. I give mine about £1 each of additional food per day, which generally is a mix of oats, barley, which is what they're having now, and pig nuts, which you can buy from agricultural stores. Of course, they will also devour fresh fruit and veggies, so any excess brassicas, carrots, turnips, pumpkins, and fruits like apples and pears, you name it really, except of course potatoes, because they always have to be cooked first. But other than that, any fruit and veggies you can give them and they will absolutely relish. And mine do also get the occasional egg, I have to say, when my chickens produce an abundance, like in the spring. And the wild counterparts of pigs, wild boar, would certainly eat eggs in the forest when they found them, being omnivores. And one of the great things about pigs is that they'll eat just about all the things on a small holding which the other animals won't. Gnarly old brassica roots being a good example, which even my rabbits turn their noses up at. One of the problems with pigs, I have to say, is that they have a very strong hierarchy. So as you can see, Fatso, the big ginger one, pushed Titch, the smaller one, off her own bowl of food and is now stealing it, leaving Titch with a lot less. And this is a problem I've had with these two since day one. And it's kind of why I didn't feel any sense of guilt in naming the big ginger one Fatso, even though it's a bit of an insulting name, I suppose. But when you watch them every day, and Fatso gets a bowl and a half and Titch gets half a bowl, it's a bit frustrating. What I end up doing usually, I'm not doing it now for the purpose of the video, but what I normally do is I separate Titch out when feeding so she gets as much as Fatso. But it is something you have to really watch with pigs. There tends to be a very strong hierarchy and the dominant pigs will get most of the food. So what do pigs most love in life? A slightly more whimsical question, I suppose. But as a huge part of my pleasure in keeping animals is seeing their pleasure and knowing that they're happy, I also think it's a really important question to ask and address. And I can only really speak for my own pigs, of course, and considering how different they are from each other, I can only imagine how different your pigs might be if you got some or if you already have some from mine. But the thing that these two love most in life is, without question, food. In the wild, pigs would spend almost every waking minute rooting around in the forest and undergrowth, hunting out everything from insects to fermented fruit to mushrooms and even the occasional truffle. So they obviously have quite sophisticated palates and spend a lot of their day thinking about food. So I think throwing in the odd seasonal treat now and again is going to make your pigs giddy with delight, at least for the 5 seconds it takes them to devour it. They also love belly rubs, and one of the best things that you can buy when you get some pigs is one of these, a very thick, wiry, scratchy brush, as I'm now going to attempt to demonstrate. Pig, 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 pig. Pig, 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 pig. But I should point out, because they have such thick, wiry fur, this is something you want to do quite often. I try and give them a brush at least once a week. And if it's a sunny day, they will sort of roll over onto their backs and let you do this on their bellies, which is quite fun. Pig, 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 pig. So now you know what they love, but what about what they hate? Well, surprisingly, my pigs don't seem to mind the rain, which is probably a good thing living here in Ireland. And I suppose originating in a place like New Zealand, which also has a wet climate, it does kind of make sense. We had a really wet winter, one of the worst on record, and they were out diligently digging away the entire time. They never got any kind of skin problems or problems with their trotters, even though the ground was very wet. But one thing they definitely don't like is the cold. I've seen them shiver from time to time on cold winter days, and bear in mind it rarely gets below freezing here in the winter in the west of Ireland. So if you do live in a cold climate, that's really something you've got to watch out for. Make sure they've got a warm, straw-filled house to retreat to on those chilly nights. The other thing, much to my frustration, that they don't like is nettle roots. The two perennials which I have in abundance here on my land are creeping buttercup, which they thankfully adore and eat, and nettles, which they will dig up, but they'll leave all the roots on the surface. They won't eat them. So in an area which hasn't previously been cleared, you do still have to put in a bit of work and pull out the nettle roots before you can start planting things there. Otherwise, as soon as the pigs are moved away, all the nettle roots will reshoot and grow new weeds. However, the single thing that my pigs dislike the most, wait for it, is being picked up. I have never heard an animal make such a high-pitched squeal in all my life. I don't pick them up very often for that very reason, particularly now they're getting so big. But when I have to, such as when they escape, they make a noise that, frankly, it's akin to a toddler being force-fed Brussels sprouts for the first time with a megaphone over its mouth. It's absolutely horrendous. It's a good job that I don't have any neighbours, because if I did, I think hearing that sound, they'd probably call the police. Any responsible human being would, frankly. And finally, would I recommend pigs, and more specifically kunekunes, to other people? Absolutely. They're charming, charismatic little animals, which if you keep them as pets or working companions, as I do, will absolutely steal your heart. If you keep them for meat, you might struggle to say goodbye when that day comes, but I'm sure you'll give those animals a great life, and in return they'll give you many great meals. They really aren't hard to look after, and because they have designated outdoor toilet areas, they don't really require any cleaning either, just feeding and providing with water. In my opinion, they're considerably less work to look after than, say, chickens or ducks, though they do definitely require more food per head than poultry would. I probably spend maybe €5 each on them per month, and that's to make sure they have the extra grains and the pig nuts and things. If you don't have access to homegrown fruit, veggies, roots, grass, as I do, I don't know what they're doing over there right now, playing with some straw by the looks of it. If you don't have access to the homegrown produce that I do, then you can probably double the amount you spend. Kunekunes is a breed, a small, gentle, hardy little pigs. Perfect, I think, for small holdings, but they do still need space. A regular sized garden just isn't going to cut it, I'm afraid. That's it for this video, but if you have any additional questions, feel free to post them in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. As always, a huge thank you for watching, subscribing, and contributing to the channel. Your continued support enables me to make videos like this, so it really does mean a lot to me. Until the next video, from me, from this little piggy and the big fat ginger one in the background, bye for now. Oh, yeah, get. Don't chew on that, please. Don't chew on that microphone. Thank you. No! Come here. Come here. Come here. I don't care how much noise you make. So I'm going to try and get the pigs in shot as much as I can, but as you can probably imagine, they like to wander around. They're not the easiest creatures in the world to keep still, and they like to knock things over. Yeah, I thought that would get you running, which I know some of you don't agree with, in spite of him having... I've never seen so much dandruff in all my life. You can probably see it coming off on the camera. Oh yes, lots of dandruff. Lots of dandruff could make a snow globe out of you. Oh. Why? Not on the camera, please. Already dirty enough without your muddy snout prints. Oh, there we go. Piggy heaven. You're gonna roll over, Fatso. You're gonna roll over. You're gonna roll over. Oh, go on, roll over. Go on. Go on, the sun's come out. Roll over. Go on. She's not gonna roll over. They've got lovely ears, pigs. Very, very soft, downy fur behind their ears. This fur here is very coarse and wiry, but here it's like a teddy bear. Good for grabbing on and warming your hands up in winter. Very long tails. Didn't notice that. Almost to the ground. Oh yeah, don't you eat that. Ugh. Nom 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 nom. Yeah. Let's try that again, shall we?